This is Ketchum with the Foundry. We're going to go ahead and show you this little workflow that started here with Modo. So with that, this is all about hard surface modeling using clay model to do automatic retopology using Modo 10.2. So I'm going to open up a file and load the clay model that I have, and I selected millimeters and loaded the file here. So the clay model, the scan is coming in not aligned to the world grid, and I'm checking out a few of my viewport settings to optimize how I like to look at the clay model. So I'm using I'm going to be going into the setup tab, as you can see here. So I'm in the setup tab, and I'm just go ahead and selecting a couple of polygons here that I know want to be on a flat plane. So go ahead and use I'm using the viewport properties here, and also I'm setting my I will be aligning those polygons to the work plane, and then I'm going to set the center point to be aiming so the green is pointing up towards the top of the clay, and here the 180 I think is correct here. So I was setting up the Y orientation to be correct here, and so once I've done that, making sure that the Y is pointing up and the X is running down the back side of the clay model. So once I've done that, then I'm going to use switchback work plane to default, and then I'll select everything and go ahead and reset or zero out all the transformations, and now the model is flat on the ground. And the only thing left to do now is switch to a top view and go ahead and try to get this aligned, the center line of the vehicle running down the center line of the grid. So once I've done that and kind of got it into place, I still need to kind of clean up the clay and orient the scan so that I know it's on the ground because I used the setup match to work plane, and now I'm just using visually here, aligning and snapping the clay to a flat X and Z plane. And once I've got that, now I'll clean up the rest of the mesh and also show work plane or grid. I can turn that off so I'm not looking at that. And now also in my in my preferences, I've set up my flatness of perspective to be something closer to 2 or 200 if you're using percentage, or 2 if you're using just decimal point. 2 or 200% flatness. And then setting my center point here and making sure everything is clean, set the center point, and now I'm going to go ahead and tidy up the model. Now I remembered in the viewport display properties that I had turn off or show selections turned off, so I was making selections there and was not seeing a result. That was that I had it turned off as far as the display property. It was selecting, I just didn't have it doing so. And now I'm just kind of going in here using the lasso tool and tidying up the rest of the polygons that I don't want in this selection. Now I can use this, or I can use slice, of course. So I can do middle mouse click and select things facing the camera, or middle mouse click selects all the way through, right mouse click selects just what's aiming at the camera. And so I can see here at the center line of the clay is a gap, and it's not balanced well across the center line here. So I'm using the slice with fast slice and split turned on, so that when I mouse up, then it creates the slicing of the polygons and retessellates each one of the polygons that it comes across. So I can go ahead and select individual components here individually, or I can just double click on the main mesh and then invert the selection using the bracket key and go ahead and say delete, or hitting the delete key. And here I'm grabbing the rest of the armature and using up arrow to grow the selection. Now I've got the clay, and now I'm using instance to kind of look at what that looks like. And I've also used a curvature material to kind of look at how the fillets and radii are on this clay, so I can kind of figure out the main surfaces. So now I'm going to go ahead and create 2 layers, one called edge flow and one called edge block So I'm in retopology mode now. And I'm going to just go ahead and use a spline curve. And while I'm on the edge lock layer, I'm going to go ahead and create all the areas that I want to contain and define as a hard edge. So I'm using the shift key to start another spline curve, although I'm inside the same layer. And I'm just go ahead and trace around the key areas that I think that need to be broken up or should have topology be flowing and respect these feature edges. So I know that this will be a big fillet afterwards, but for right now I'm going ahead and just using the snapping key. I'm snapping these onto the mesh. Of course, background constraint is turned on using points, and using shift key again to start another set of curves. So after going through the whole model and setting up curves as edge lock, I will then create a new layer and use edge flow. And flow, I think of it like how I would like the light or the water to flow across the surface. So that's how I think of it when I'm putting down the curves. So again, here's another edge. I know we'll continue on here using spline, using the shift key to create several more feature lines on this. So body side, rear end, the lower front bumper area, and so on. So we'll go ahead and continue to select key areas that I think we'll want to have a crease or some sort of a fillet. But right now I'm not worried about washouts. I just want the main feature edges to be recognized because in the AutoRetopo tool set there is a crease angle which will leverage these key edges where we've put these feature lines. So around that wheel well area we will use the push tool, radial push, to make these a little more circular. We can see now that they're not the greatest, but I'm going to go ahead and snap a curve around here. I could just use a circle and snap it to it, but just trying to show the easy use of like a spline curve either in Alias or inside of Illustrator. So that was my idea here, using shift key again, just defining these hard edges, and I'm still in the edge lock item. As soon as I finish the items that are all going to be edges, again I will create an item called edge flow. So we're just about done here. So go ahead and using the shift key again restarts the tool without having to drop it. And this is very much it doesn't have to be all that precise because the AutoRetopology is looking at these curves and the amount of polygons you have, so there's no need to overly control that. So there's the edge lock, and I think I missed an area here, so I'm going to go ahead and drop some more curves here along the edge to kind of guide what the surface should be doing here. Here's an undercut crease, shift key, starting another curve, spline curve to come down, and along this hard edge here. I know this is the edge of the model, but just trying to give it a little more guidance as it's coming through that area. Might as well drop one more around the front end here, along the front of the nose of this feature. And yeah, probably should go ahead and fill those holes, but here we are creating another feature line. So just go ahead and go through your model and think of where you want things to flow. Don't go overkill, but just kind of think of like if you had to make primary surfaces. So again, I'm going to go through the wheel well here, just drop a little quick curve. Not exact, I could copy and paste from the front, but it's just as quick to snap a few curves here. So I'm going to create another one called flow. Now flow is essentially how do I want the light, how would I like the polygons to flow along the surface. So I went ahead and selected on the curves, and I'm making a selection set from those curves from that item. So I'm making a selection set. I'm going to go ahead and call them Retopo Edge Lock, because you have to be very exact with the terms that you're using. Uppercase Retopo Edge Lock has to be typed in exactly that way. Retopo Edge Lock. Okay, and then the other one, which we'll do here, is Retopo Edge. So I've got one called Retopo Edge Lock. And now I'm going to go ahead and snap using the spline curves again on edge flow. So I have a container called edge flow. And now I'm just kind of selecting on the surface how I want the highlight to flow, or how, in general, how I'd like the flow of the polygons. So I'm just kind of giving it, in generic like flow lines, how I think that the surface highlights should flow along those surfaces. They don't need to be very, very, too detailed. Actually, lighter is better as far as complexity of the curve. So I'm going through and selecting all of these, and I'll make another selection set shortly on these edge flow, kind of how I think the highlights should flow, or the topology flow line should roll. So now I'll go ahead and select these after I create one more. I think I've created one or two more here. So down the back, along the line, how I'd like that to flow, and returning on itself. And because I know this model is going to be mirrored, I'm kind of aiming those last points to the center. And you can kind of see how the edges, how I'd like them to flow. It's probably not necessary to do the inside of the wheel well, because I'm probably just going to do a draft and extrusion here anyways. But just to show the process of using spline curves to do flow lines for the Retopo edge flow. So now I'm selecting those, and I'm going to go ahead and make a selection set. I've named it, and then down here in my statistics under selection set, you can see Retopo flow and also one Retopo lock. So those need to be active, and also the mesh needs to be active. And then here it's very much a playing with the settings, because this is a scale model. This is a 5th scale model. Of course, a quarter scale model or a full size model, you're going to have different settings. And so here we go. We're going to go ahead and run the tool, which we've got the 2 selection sets active, and then I run this tool a few times because I have too many polygons. I have both of these selection sets active, and I'm trying to reduce the count. Now the percentage there, the polygons, it's a percentage of how many polygons are already in the scene. So if I have 1,000 and I type in 0.5, I'm saying here do what you can with only 500. So I'm playing with the numbers here to try to season that, not using a vector map, but I'm using these edges or curves here. And so I keep running the tool to try to find the sweet spot or balance of right amount of polygons, but still capture the shape and keep the creases along the edges. So and then I'll start to use a smoothing tool. I'll take this and use the smooth tool back on top of the original scan to try to push it back down towards the original topology as a base. So I'm using the measurement tool to kind of get an idea how big this thing is, and so that when I'm setting up the percentages and or the crease angle, I have an idea how big the model is. And then here I have the scan, the retopo, and the flow and selection sets all active, just to kind of see the elements that are all needed to generate the model. So here we have the original and now the retopo. So I've turned off the scan, and sorry, the scan is still there. I just have the and now I'm smoothing a little bit, hitting that, try a few iterations of smoothing, try to see what we can get out of it. And now I'm using like linear line and playing with some of that, using curve and not using the curve but not the line, because it'll make it too straight. So you don't want to lose some of your features or your details here, of course. But I'm just trying to see how I can sweeten up the lines a little bit by using linear, using curve instead of perfectly straight. And you might take too much out of it, but these are some of the things that I've been playing with to try to get an idea maybe how to leverage the tool a little bit better. And of course, using the regular retopology tools, and come in and clean some items up. So I can definitely see some issues here around the wheel wells that definitely need some attention. Here I'm setting the set to the local location, and set local orientation using push. And there's the AutoRetopo model. Very much still looks like the scan, but all the polygons are still complying or flowing with the surface. And so I just threw a material on it. I'm going to go ahead and mirror it over, kind of get an idea, just kind of see what it looks like when it renders up, kind of get the main surfaces identified. But here we have the retopology and the smooth and unsmooth. So around this wheel well here, we're going to go ahead and select this row. Try to clean this up a little bit. Right there, there's like a star point or even a six-sided area. So it's definitely going to need a little bit of tweaking and a little tuning, which I'm fine with. I can delete or spin the verts using the V key to spin an edge. Try to get this a little more, to have it come together a little bit better. So deleting a few, you might have to drop out a few, clean up a few, which is fine. Or you can just, model a cylinder altogether and try to match the edge count there. But so I'm trying to tidy this up a little bit, and then what we'll do is take a cylinder and use the push tool to kind of conform it down to a perfect cylinder. So I'm just trying to get things tidied up here. So the goal is to not have any kind of 3 or 5-sided edges or end-gons along the wheel well edge. So by taking the I'm going to use this front edge here. I'm going to drop a cylinder in. If I knew what the diameter is, I can just key it in as well. But I'm going to use it as a background item, this mesh, and kind of get it placed. And then I'm going to paint select the inside of the wheel well, the area that I want to be perfectly circular. So I'm kind of paint selecting here, a little bit tedious, but doesn't take too long. So I'm just using paint select with my Wacom tablet and selecting the poly faces, and as soon as I get that all selected, I'm going to use the push tool, and we're going to use push radial. So with the deform turned on, I've got I'm going to use my mesh. I'm going to use to constrain down to that cylinder, using local, using push, and using radial to push it down to kind of conform it, make it a little more cylindrical. So that's another way you can quickly align surfaces to be a little more compliant there. So yeah, that's just another little workflow to do to get wheel wells to be a little more round and circular. And then, of course, there's a lot of tidying up to do, but again, I'll bounce back and forth by using the smooth tool. Once I get this, trying to make this a little nicer, of course, I got to get that geometry to be a little bit cleaner there, but that's kind of in general how I use retopo edge lock and retopo edge flow, and that's kind of the how and the why, how I use that. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can bridge in between here. I don't know if I get a bridge here because there's some pretty ugly geometry I have there, but that's fine. So I'll use the bridge there, kind of see what that looks like. Probably not the best, but get you started. You can render it, you can trim it out, you can shade it. Even though it's not perfect, you got a retopoed flow, but using edge lock and edge flow will definitely give you a more controlled and predictable result. So you got to lay down the curves, create a selection set, lay down the curves for the flow, create another selection set, and then make sure your selection sets are active, and then select your mesh, and then run the AutoRetopo, and it looks at the 2 sets of curves to drive the flow and the highlights of the surface. All right, that should do it. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon, guys.